President Kennedy, once they knew that the missiles were and the soldiers were already in Cuba, what do you do? And we knew. What do you do?
You would place Cuba under quarantine.
You must have seen my next slide.
What does quarantine mean? Does anybody know what quarantine means? Who hasn't answered one? Okay. What do you
Off
think?
limits, generally due to viruses.
Good. Good.
Wow, this is really good. So President Kennedy had a choice. He had all of his advisors, and we'll see the advisors later, but he had the admirals and the generals and all of his Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State, everybody around in this big room. And they said, what should we do? And the admirals and the generals said, well, we have to invade. We have to knock out all these nuclear missile sites. And then President Kennedy and Defense Secretary McNamara and Bobby Kennedy, who was his brother and Attorney General at the time, said, well, if we go in and we knock out all the missiles, that's fine. But we're also going to kill Russian soldiers. Then what's Russia going to do? They're going to retaliate. And that's going to be the beginning of World War III. So Kennedy's getting a lot of push to invade. He said no. He said, I think we should negotiate. Because if we invade, we know what's going to happen. It's going to end up in World War. And nobody's going to win. So he said, what we're going to do is we're going to send Premier Khrushchev a very tough message. And this is all done by teletype. Teletype is like an old typewriter. And then it goes on a cable under the sea, and it goes to our embassy, and then they take it over to the Russian embassy. It takes forever. So,
Can I ask a question? Why do you think he used teletype? Why do you think he just didn't call Premier Khrushchev? Okay, what do you think, Ellen?
Because they didn't have contact.
Right, exactly.
excellent, excellent. There was no other way to communicate. And so the first message was a really tough one. The second one, Kennedy said, tell you what we'll do. You take the missiles out of Cuba. Take your Russian soldiers out of Cuba. And then in 6 months, we'll take our missiles out of Italy and Turkey that could have been trained on the Soviet Union. They weren't at that point, but they could have been. So Khrushchev, being a very smart guy and realizing that he didn't want World War either, said, okay, I'll do that. So they came to an agreement that they would take it all out. Now, what's happening?
Next slide. Next slide.
Here are the ships going to the blockade or the quarantine. And we couldn't call it a blockade, but we had to call it a quarantine for legal reasons. And so here you see a carrier with all those aircraft, all loaded with bombs. And the ships all loaded with armaments. And the next slide shows one of our planes looking at one of the freighters coming in that had the long-range missiles.
Can you see the missiles on that boat? On the ship?
Yes.
Can you see them, PJ?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the next one
Next, love.
shows we had a naval base in Cuba that we'd had since 1907. So it was a long-term treaty. And there's Havana way up there. But this is only a couple of 100 miles. But when I was down here in this Guantanamo naval base, I went along, and you weren't supposed to do this, but I went along the wall. They had a huge fence, and then on the other side were the Cuban soldiers, and on our side were the American soldiers. And it all, the only thing that's separating was this, you know, barbed wire fence. So somebody could have climbed the fence, but you were patrolling it all the time. But we had this base here, and so we'll show the next slide.
Next slide.
How big is that area? How big is that base?
The base is 45 square miles. I mean, it's big. It's big, and it has barracks. And when I was there, families were living there, and they had soccer fields. I mean, everything that you would need to exist on a base, in addition to armaments and training and all that. So this is the ship I was on, and it was what they call a destroyer escort. It was 300 feet long, and I was the operations officer, which means I'm in charge of communications, electronics, radars, and okay, next. So we got a message. We're down to Guantanamo Bay for training. You know, we didn't know anything was happening. Everything was, you know, just normal. We got a message from the president and the chief of naval operations that said, intercept all Soviet ships going into Havana.
What does that mean?
What's that mean?
What do you think that means?
Like you try to like not let the ship go into Havana and the Cuban area and like try to send them back or like damage the ships.
Wow, exactly.
Take them out?
That's
No.
that's a.
No.
I'll come back to that one. Yeah.
No, you don't take them out because they have nuclear bombs. If those nuclear bombs go off, they will destroy the base. So why would you destroy the base and for one dang ship?
So what happened is these are good answers. We established this quarantine, which means about 700 miles off Cuba, we had American ships patrolling all around, and we were one of them. And all of a sudden, and then what it says, intercept all Soviet ships going into Havana. So I didn't know. I mean, I was the top secret control officer, and I was typing away, and the message is coming out, and all the officers are saying, what's it say? What's it say? Intercept all Soviet ships going into Havana. Well, what does that mean? What, you know, everybody has a different idea what it means. Does that mean that you put one over the bow? If they don't stop, you sink them? Or does it mean that you let them go and see if they'll turn around? So I'm the officer of the deck, which means I'm responsible for what direction the ship goes, how fast, and next to me is the captain. So I wait as long as I can, and probably the distance from here to the far end of the playground, no less, those trees, the Russian ships are coming in, and we know that some of them have these long-range missiles. So I said to the captain, I mean, here I am, 22 years old, and I said, Captain, what do you think we should do? He said, get everybody with a pad and pencil, because we didn't have computers, didn't have cell phones.
No iPads.
No iPads. So write everything down you see. Take pictures of everything. Can you imagine that? Yeah. Take pictures of everything, and for me, don't change the course or the speed of the ship. So we did, and we let them by, and we didn't know what was happening in Washington. But President Kennedy was having these discussions with Premier Khrushchev, long distance. And finally, Khrushchev accepted the second one, which is get your soldiers and missiles out of Cuba, and then later, in 6 months, we'll take the missiles out of Turkey and Italy. So Khrushchev accepted that. Then we see the ships turning around and heading back out to sea. But if they hadn't, it would have been really starting World War III. So I thought, here you are, 22 years old, and if he's so close, if he comes into you and hits you, he can claim that you did it. And I said, oh my God. Well, so fortunately, the captain, being a very smart guy, decided the best thing to do is to record everything and let them go. Here are our ships going into setting up the quarantine. So when we had a lot of them. Okay. So
this we already did this one.
yeah, we did this one, so we don't.
Let's
we
go
don't
to the
need-
next one.
We don't
Go to the
need
next
this
one.
one. We can go to the next one. Now, what's happening in the U.S. at this time is it became known that this was happening, that there was a potential nuclear war about to take place, and so this is a school. They took everybody out of the classrooms and into the hallways where there are less windows, and everybody did the duck and cover. And this, lots of people I know were involved in this. And so this was not only down in Cuba, but it was happening all over the United States. So we began negotiations, and initially Khrushchev said he wouldn't back down. And after 13 days, we finally worked this agreement that we just talked about. Okay, next. Now, this shows the White House and President Kennedy. This is Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General's brother, and all of his key advisors, trying to decide what to do. And they finally came up with the idea of the quarantine, as opposed to an invasion, which was a really smart thing. I mean, now, what did we learn from all this? I mean, President Kennedy wouldn't be bullied going into war, because his advisors were all saying, well, I mean, the logical thing is you go in and you take out the missile sites. Oh, as we talked about earlier, but what happens if you kill some Russian soldiers or some Cuban soldiers, you know? So then they retaliate. Yes.
They'll bring in like heavier missiles.
Exactly. And that's what was on the water, on those ships. Exactly. And those heavier missiles could then hit Washington, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, all over. Now, the interesting thing, just this last March, the Obama administration announced that 2 restrictions on embargoes would be relaxed. So it's easier now to travel to Cuba.
Does anyone know anyone who's been to Cuba recently? I know my neighbor went. You know somebody?
Well, the mission at our church has been helping churches in Cuba.
I almost went last year, yeah, with Christ Church.
Yep. And so now you can go as a mission, you can go to study the art or the music or the architecture, but you can't go and say, well, I just want to go to a hotel on the beach and go down and swim and just have fun. That's not allowed yet. But if you're from a European country, you can. So they are allowed to do that. So we're getting much more relaxed in our relations with Cuba. And President Obama recently went to Cuba. This is unprecedented. The last time we had a president in Cuba was 1928, if you can imagine. So this is how a war could be avoided. And unfortunately, during the First World War and the Second World War, they didn't do that. They invaded. And the result was, this horrendous, awful loss of life. So President Kennedy was just extremely smart. He showed great leadership, and the fact that he would not be bullied by his advisors that thought the only way to do it was to go in and attack.
That's it. That's the last one.
Where is it? Where is it?
So
Does it-
let me ask this question, because you have so much history. What made you go into Navy? Was anybody else around you at that time that joined the armed services?
That's a good question, and I had a slide on that, and I decided to take it out. But it's really a good question. When I graduated from college, everybody had to register for what they called the draft.
What's the draft? Who knows? You never heard of it? Oh gosh, boys.
Drift?
Sorry?
Drift?
The draft?
Oh.
Draft?
What do you think?
Were they draft college players?
Were they?
It's
That's
it's
good
similar.
though.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Good, Lucas.
When you have
Smart
to
fun.
like sign up and then they pick like people to be in the war.
Exactly.
Very good.
That's it. That's perfect. Did everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. The draft was you got a number. Yes.
What rank were you in the military?
I started off. Well, first of all, I'll give you a little history. And the question was, why did I join the Navy? And I had to sign up for the draft as everybody else did, and you get a number. And my number was getting closer and closer. So I knew I had to go into the service in some capacity. Now, one choice is you go in for 6 months active duty as a soldier. And then you go your 2 weeks vacation in the summer, you go to train. And once a month for 6 years, you spend your weekend training. So I decided instead of that I would go into the Navy, and I went to what they call Officer Candidate School. And Officer Candidate School, it's like school. You have to pass. And if you pass, then you're assigned to a ship. And the basic, you start off as an ensign, which is 1 bar, and then a lieutenant junior grade, which is 1.5 bars, and then a lieutenant 2 bars. And that's what I was. I was a lieutenant JG, and then a lieutenant when I retired. And so then I decided that the Navy would be much better because you get responsibility. I mean, the responsibility I had in running this ship with 200 men, I was responsible for them. You just couldn't get as a young kid, out of college. So it turned out to be a really great experience, and I would do it again.
Wow.
Any other? Yes.
Like, did you have to be in the military if you were like back in that time? Did you have to be in the military?
Can I just say one thing for you?
Yeah.
When they had the draft, all men, not women or girls, but all men between the ages of 18 and 30 you had to sign up for the draft. Everyone in the United States. And so he had to.
Not everyone was selected, but a large percentage. So if you waited until you finally got your number was called, you went in the Army. So I didn't want to wait.
Did you want it to be picked?
No, I didn't. But when I got in the Navy, I said, this is absolutely the best thing I could have done. Because if I'd been in, let's say, business, I wouldn't have had any responsibility compared to this. So this gave you leadership and decision making, and it just turned out to be, for me, the best choice of all.
Most of the time in our country, we have a voluntary military. So people choose to go and volunteer, and you can choose to do it or not to do it. So it's all voluntary. But in times of severe need, when they need more soldiers, then they might have a draft.
Yeah. Yes, Carter.
What did you do retired from the Navy?
Oh, then I went to Columbia Business School to get my graduate business degree. And then I went into business. Yes.
How many years in Navy did you do?
Well, this is interesting. I did 3 years active duty. Then I went to Columbia Business School. And then that summer, I was deciding what to do. And normally, what they do is they pick teachers to go teach officer candidate school, what I had gone through. And so I applied and was selected. So here I am in Newport, Rhode Island, teaching college graduates about the Navy. And of course, you had a manual that you went through. But I got the type of questions that you're giving me from these college graduates. I mean, they were very sharp. So that was a great experience too.
Great.
Anything else?
Do you still stay in touch with anybody from back during that time?
Yes, I do. And it's interesting. Let me just find it.
There's your stickers on your foot, Dad.